This is the Pro Perspective from House Pro, where home builders, designers, and industry experts share their views on running a modern firm.
What's the secret to building a winning team and driving sales success in an ever-changing remodeling market? Can putting people first really lead to coming out on top? Join us as I explore this question with Bill Millholland, Executive Vice President of Case Architects and Remodelers. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. We're going to be talking about both marketing and sales and preparing your team and firm for success. I'm so excited to have our guest today, Bill Millholland. He is the Executive Vice President of Case Architects and Remodeling. Bill, I know you've been there 34 years.
Long time, yeah.
Which is a long time. I thought my time, my 12 and a half years at House was a long time, but you definitely
that qualifies as a long time. Mine is a little ridiculous.
100%. And, you know, I think when we talked, there's obviously so much wisdom that you have to share with everyone out there. But I thought it was interesting when I heard you talk about, you know, early on and for the business in general, having the dual goals of, you know, getting a client to do a project and helping the team be successful. And I think the things that we're going to talk about today touch on both of those. Do you want to just take a moment and, you know, I know a lot of folks out there are familiar with Case, but for those that maybe are not deeply familiar, maybe just take a moment and share a little bit about, you know, the firm.
Sure. So Case is located in the Washington, D.C. area. We have 4 offices, one in suburban Maryland, just outside the city, one in D.C. within the city limits, and then 2 in Northern Virginia as well. Each one of those offices has, showroom is too strong a word, a design studio, more a selection space within them. So we try to help clients make all their product selections right in the office. We've got a warehouse location as well in the area. But in terms of the firm's been around since 1963. Fred Case founded the firm way back then. And it started off as, of course, a tiny little construction business. But he soon realized that what can sometimes be adversarial relationship between architect and contractor was a riddle he wanted to solve. So he started to hire people out of architecture schools in the area and decided that he was really interested in building a design build firm as opposed to a contracting firm, and was one of the first in the nation to do that on a residential remodeling sort of from a residential remodeling perspective. And he's always been a big believer. I think the quote is, he wanted to build a business, not a practice. So Fred, from the very beginning, sort of structured the organization so it wasn't dependent on him. So we, from the very early days, had a management team and a focus on how does the business continue to run regardless of who's involved in it. So that's just a quick snapshot of who we are.
I think that's a great segue, great insight, but also a great segue into what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share a little bit of a quote from Bruce Case, the CEO of the firm, because we're going to talk about sales and marketing, but we're going to talk a lot about how processes are really kind of the foundation of everything. And Bruce says, clear, proven, and consistent processes bring comfort to clients because they know what to expect and when, comfort to team members because they're clear about their responsibilities and empowerment every step of the way, and comfort to the business because consistent processes lead to predictable results. And I love this because it's why we created House Pro software, right? To enable any business to more easily put those repeatable, scalable processes in place.
Right.
So
yeah, and I think not enough businesses have done that. You know, especially in my world, the remodeling world, many of the businesses are fairly small. There are owner or owners of the business wearing multiple hats, and they just don't have either the time or the inclination or a little bit of both to actually write this stuff down. And then, maybe we'll talk a little further on about bringing new people on board. And if you don't have all of this information documented, it's very, very hard to get somebody up to speed without standing over the shoulder all the time, because you invented the process and you're the only one that knows it, and it's not written down anywhere, so you have to tell it to somebody. So we are extraordinarily process focused, because again, for a residential remodeler, we're a pretty big team. I think we're 160-ish people, something like that. You know, in the scheme of business world, it's a tiny business, but from a remodeler's perspective, a design build remodeler's perspective, it's a pretty good sized team. And we just couldn't all sort of work off the same sheet of music unless we had very detailed processes and they were documented, and new people or even veterans knew what to do almost reflexively without having to think about it. You just know after this happens, then this happens. And, you know, across the business, we've got design, production, sales, everybody knowing what's happening is really important to us.
Yep. If it only lives in the owner's head, you're in trouble. So
you're in trouble.
Not a recipe.
Or you're never going to be more tomorrow than you are today.
Exactly.
And that's
not
a valid decision.
Yeah.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if your desire is to build a business, then I think spending the time on developing those processes and documenting them is really time well spent. And then I don't know about the rest of the world, but we have more clients that identify as project managers now than ever before. And whether that's, you know, they work in business and they manage projects, or they're in the IT sector and they're developing software, but that's I mean, everybody is kind of a project manager of sorts. So clients even find real comfort in knowing that we have a thoughtfully developed process for turning a conversation at the beginning into a finished project at the end.
Yep. The expectations are high, but it's also a huge opportunity to impress a potential client who likes that structure.
Absolutely. And some order instead of chaos.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, so on the theme of sort of structure and business frameworks, I know you're also a fan of the power of three. So we've got
a mutual friend.
Three topics to give folks as sort of a mental roadmap for our conversation today, if they're out there doing something while they're listening. The first is sales strategy and opportunity development. The second is team building and performance management. And the third, finally, are technology and process optimization to support the first two. But since we're focusing, on a particular topic today, Bill, maybe tell me a little bit about why sales and marketing are top of mind right now.
Right now, I think it's because we all got used to sales falling off of trees and, long lead times that stretched out forever. And there was a lot of comfort in that. And all of a sudden, those are starting to shrink a little bit. It's not that it's not good, but it's not as good as it was before. And so I think it's forcing us to sort of get back in the gym and redevelop some of those muscles that we lost track of when clients were just saying, where do I stand in line to write you a check? Because I have to have this project done. And, I just need it done. And that's not the case anymore. And people are a little more cautious with their spend. They want to know a little more about what they're spending money on. They may take a little bit more nurturing to make the decision to actually proceed with a project. So, and again, we've got a fairly big team of guys in the field. And I always see our job in sales is keeping those guys busy. We're the sharp end of the spear, and that if they are busy, the business is going to be just fine. And that's, it's kind of the economy stupid. Well, it's the guys stupid. If we keep them busy, we're going to be okay.
Great. So that's I think a good jumping off point to talk a little bit about that sort of pipeline and sales cycle. Maybe talk a little bit about the metrics you use to determine a healthy pipeline that's going to keep that team busy and that's going to move, that the sales cycle is moving the way that it should be, especially if you're seeing changes in what's out there.
Yeah. So we keep track of just about everything we can think of. And of course, that all starts with leads. So at the beginning of a fiscal year, we develop lead projections, just like sales projections. And we break those down monthly. And then we break those down jurisdictionally, whether that's Maryland, Virginia, DC. And then we even break that down into project type, whether that might be an addition or a larger scale project, whether that's kitchen and bath focused, or maybe that's something a little more sort of general remodeling, like a screen porch or a deck or basement, whatever it might be. And so we keep careful tabs on all of that. There's an equation. It's math. We can take how much we want to sell in the course of a year, what's an average job size for each one of those categories, what's a close rate for each one of those categories, and it's just math. It spits out how many leads you need in order to hit your projections. So we track that very closely. Then we also, again, back to process, we have a 3-step process for how we engage with the client on the design and sales side of things. And so first step in that is what we call case study. Clever, huh? And that we keep tabs on that. Then as a client moves along in the process, we enter something called contract documents, which is a little more serious step, involves a little more deposit from that client, and then a contract. So we are tracking all of that information as we go, in addition to average job size, because it's something we've learned along the way, is that oftentimes over the course of a year, the number of projects that sell can be remarkably similar, but the total volume of sales can vary significantly, and it is often ties back to average job size. During the pandemic, our average job size was $300,000+, and now it's $220,000. So for every 3 jobs, you got to sell another one to kind of get caught up. So it just means a little more activity in that sales process. So we're tracking all of that information per jurisdiction, per work type, and then per individual, because we've got a team of what we call project developers out there representing us and trying to convince opportunities, leads, whatever you want to call them, that we're the right firm to work with them. So we pay attention to all of those things.
What are the major marketing or sales levers that you pull if things aren't meeting? So you're at the beginning of the year, you've got sales goals, you've backed into, I assume, sort of leads and a certain conversion rate to, opportunity, case study rate. And if how often are you revisiting those to say, oh dear, right? Either we're not getting enough leads or our leads aren't converting at the expected rate. And what are the adjustments that you guys look at?
Again,
it's not working.
We pay attention to a lot of this stuff. So I'd say daily we're tracking leads and case studies and all of those sorts of things in and out of CRMs, and then notifications coming and all the rest. But as you mentioned, sometimes you don't hit those numbers. And, if it's a daily thing, then you let that settle out and see where the trend is going. But if we start to get behind, then as you're saying, we have a couple different levers we can pull, and most of those are sort of general marketing. We do a lot of advertising in the newspaper here, the Washington Post, and that has been successful for us, and some other activities like that. But we also lean on our team a fair amount, in that, when leads are down, we have thousands or tens of thousands of past clients, and we can reach back out to them and see what's going on and mention that, that phase 2 that we had talked about, was it time to start thinking about that? Those sorts of things we do. And then, of course, PALS is a big lead generator for us as well, in that we, keep tabs on that, how each jurisdiction is performing. Should we mix things up a little bit on that end? And then, social media, other outlets through whatever it is, Instagram, Facebook, those sorts of things. So we're constantly paying attention to which of those are performing or underperforming. And then do we need to sort of turn the dial up in some of the other areas where maybe we're seeing more success?
And does that help you impact job size, or do you really rely more on the team if and saying, hey guys, we need to bring up, our average job size?
It's tough to influence average job size. You can do it on the margins, but it's if a client has a budget of, pick a number, $250,000, to convince that client they should spend $300,000 just because it can be challenging. We might try to weave in some economy of scale discussion or disruption to lifestyle discussion, where if you're thinking about phasing a project, it's often a much better decision to do all of it at one time than to wait for phase two, because it costs less, it takes less time, and you only have to endure a remodeling process once instead of twice. So we might have some of those discussions, but it can be challenging to influence radically average job size. People always come into a project and say, I'd like to spend X, and then spend a little bit more once they get exposed to the world and, see all the amazing things that can be done. But I kind of think, when was the last time you ever established a budget for anything in your life and stuck to it? I have not been successful in most of those.
No, they're more kids in a candy store when they see the types of products that are available.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And just, ignorant, don't know. They just don't know what is possible or what else is out there. And once they get exposed to that world, all of a sudden, those things matter. A heated floor in the bathroom, that would be wonderful. Yes, that is worth a couple $1,000s to me, or whatever the number is,
And in terms of the conversations that your team is having, I guess, when do they start seeding kind of those? It's like, okay, you've got a budget, but are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about that? Mm-hmm. How early in the process does that happen?
In the house at the initial lead. Most definitely there. Again, we have the luxury of maybe being a little bigger than the average design build firm. We have resources maybe others don't, but we have lots and lots and lots of materials where you can have fairly detailed conversations about a client, with a client about a project, before we know the details of that project. And we can help a client understand kitchen, bathroom, powder room, add a screen porch, and finish the basement while we're at it, what that might look like in terms of budgeting, and what each one of those components might represent in terms of a component of that budget. And so that they can start to wrap their head around that, or make decisions like, it's not worth spending $200,000 to finish my basement. That doesn't make sense. Let's focus on this, that, and the other thing. So we're trying to have those. And the other thing we try honestly to do is have honest discussions about that budget, and not blue sky sunny day discussions about that project, and just try to understand what's going to be important to that client, what's the level of finish, what's the level of detail, so that we can be talking about components that are realistically what we think the project is going to be when we put a contract in front of them, and not, well, we think it's going to be 150 to 200 and it turns into 400 to 500. Those things happen, but it's often because we've added scope or something like that. We want to be as realistic as we can up front, because there's a lot of time and effort involved in everybody's part, our part, but also the client's part. And let's not go through that unless we have a pretty good understanding of what we need to do.
Yep. I'm sure a lot of folks out there are, either transitioning or in the process of transitioning from just owner selling to having a team that's selling, which is a big transition. What kind of advice do you have in terms of balancing, and salespeople have a particular mentality, I think, no matter where they come from, right? So they're focused on their goal, right? And their individual goal, but you're also trying to serve the client's needs and make sure they're well served, and also trying to hit the company objectives and balance, what's right for the company. So how do you think through that sort of interesting balance?
That's an interesting question, because we used to franchise handyman services, and we saw many of those businesses evolve to become full service design build firms. And that jump from the owner of the business controlling it to having to depend on others to do some of those tasks was one of the hardest parts of that evolution. And again, that goes back to a little bit of our earlier conversation, in that you have to document all this. You have to have something to train, right? If you don't have something to train, the training probably won't be successful. So developing those processes and documenting them. But honestly, the hardest part for many of them was just letting go, just understanding that you can't do it all.
Right.
And if you want to get to that point, you're going to have to spend some time and effort to get this person off the ground. And then coupled with that is you got to be realistic. That person is not you. They don't own the business. They haven't been working in the business for 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is. It's going to take some time. And whenever we bring a new person on board, we pretty much count on it taking a year until that person has their legs under them. They understand the process fluently. They understand their role within it. They're comfortable with how we do things, and they can project that confidence in front of a client. It takes a long time. And so somebody going through that passage, I would first spend some time in front of the mirror and make sure you were willing to let go. Then I'd start to document process, and then I'd start looking for the right fit for your organization, because I think that's really important.
It's super important, and we'll come back to kind of how you keep tabs on these things as the owner, since you're having to let go. But what do you think makes a good salesperson, and what do you look for?
So most of we call the person in a sales role, a project developer, came from within. Oftentimes they start as a designer and they work on many, many projects with project developers. And one day they're looking at the project developer next to them at the table and they think, I can do that as well or better than you can. So I think I'd like to, sort of steer the ship and not play second chair. So we get a lot of that, but we do find people from outside the organization that come in. And in either one of those situations, we're looking for somebody with a little bit of drive that understands, you are responsible for creating this business. We can get you in the door, but once you're on the stage, Mr. and Mrs. Jones have to respect you, like you, appreciate you, and think you're the person that can guide them through this process. So I think that's one thing, somebody with a motor, a little bit of drive. And then secondly, somebody that's confident, that clients can tell if you're timid in talking about, what might be possible or how long it might take or what it might cost or why you're the right person, what differentiates you from the crowd. And having somebody that's got that confidence, I think, translates into a more successful salesperson. But it's also a really technical sales role. So that person has to have, some knowledge in order to have the confidence to tell the client those sorts of things. So we're looking for, somebody that is a good fit culturally with the organization, that's organized and on top of things, that is a good communicator, because I think that's more important now than ever before. And, somebody that projects confidence in front of a client.
Yeah, I can see why hiring from within is a great, pipeline for that, because you have an opportunity for that person to become confident. They learn the business, right? They learn the technical details, but you also have that opportunity to see them in action and see what their strengths are.
Right.
When you are hiring from outside, because I know you said people from outside can be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite interview question to capture some of that for a salesperson, or what do you think are some of the ways to see whether they're going to have that client confidence?
I wish I did. So if somebody does and could send it to me, I would really appreciate that. I am really protective of our culture and our group. And it's a team of people that work well together, that we build beautiful things. We do things the right way. We don't walk away from clients. We take that responsibility really seriously. And so somebody's got to fit within that. If you're just out for yourself, if you're out to sell and run, if you're not going to participate in, whatever activities, then you're probably not the right person for us. So that's probably the first filter, honestly, that I'm going to run people through. And then after that, it's, you've got to figure this person is representing this team in that client's home? And are you comfortable with that? Is that person going to be on it? Do they have the knowledge to give that client great advice? Is this person somebody that could become something else downstream? Do they want to grow? Are they interested in growth? All those sorts of things. Because I think we can teach most of the stuff about remodeling, how you do it, what's step by step. It's those intangible, do they enjoy talking to people? Are they good communicators? Are they able to express what it is they're trying to convey? And do they make a great representative for the company? And if, all those are check marks, green lights, whatever, then I think we will often take the plunge and give it a try. But again, tempered with reality that this is not going to happen. I was talking to a guy actually the other day, and he said a company he was with before brought in a new salesperson, and they thought that person would do $3 million the first year. And it's just like, I mean, maybe it's happened once, but again, in a design build situation, it's going to take a little while to acclimate to just, what do things cost? How do I figure out what they cost? What is the process? Who's involved? Who's responsible for what? It's weeks and months to do that before you even turn them loose on going out to visit a client. And that would be with somebody, some adult supervision along to make sure that they were doing what they needed to do, which is often how we get a new person off the ground, is kind of assign a mentor, a more senior member of the team to help them along and guide them through that process.
And for a somewhat smaller firm, who do you recommend involving in the interview process for a salesperson other than the owner? And do you recommend involving other folks?
Yeah, I think it's better if you get some more people involved, most definitely. And, so much of this but almost anybody that person might interact with regularly, that if you've got whatever, if the owner is doing sales and somebody else is doing production, then I might have that production person be involved in that conversation. If you've got, a design team behind the scenes, then maybe they should be involved in that conversation. So I just think it's a good idea to weave as many people in as reasonable. And honestly, good people are hard to find. And once we identify that, then we go into a little bit of a sales role. And it's now we're trying to convince you to pick us. And that might be, we just happen to have a happy hour scheduled for after this. Why don't you hang out and, meet some of the rest of the team or whatever it might be. And that's a really good way to judge that sort of fit, that you get to see them interacting with other people. But again, on a smaller scale, that's probably tough to do. But I think it's always a good idea to have a couple different perspectives.
Involved. I think it makes sense, to sell them, to have them get a better idea of what the culture is and who the people are like. And of course, once you do bring them on board, then those people have more invested in bringing that person up to speed, because it's a relationship. It's not like, oh, Bill, you just dumped this person on me in training, right?
Or when you asked me, should we hire them? I said yes. So you've got some
exactly. So now I'm on the hook.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. So again, you're that owner trying to let go and thinking about, how do you getting comfortable? So how do you approach tracking performance for sales people, both, I guess, quantitatively and qualitatively? Because, I could see quantitatively, would love to hear kind of what the process is there. But as you said, they're representing your brand at the client's home, et cetera. What is the performance tracking on that quality?
Yeah, no. And again, I think the realistic expectations have a role to play in all of this, because it's not the next day they're out running leads. That's just not going to happen. So a lot of that would be just regular one-on-one scheduled interactions with that person where nothing else in the world mattered other than, so tell me how that phone call went. What how did the conversation play out? How did you introduce the idea of, how long have you been thinking about this? Have you ever remodeled before? Did you mention budget? How did you come up with that budget? All of the, and the first time they're going to stumble and flail. The second time they're going to do and if by the third or fourth time it's not sticking, then that's something to be concerned about potentially. And then there's the, like you said, there's John Audette's sort of your mentor, and he's got 3 leads this week. Have you been on all 3? No, I couldn't make 2 of them. Like what's going on that? And tell me, okay, so the next week you make 3. Good. Tell me what you saw. What did you appreciate how he did it? And then what might you do differently? It's just diving into those conversations until you feel like they are at a point where they can maybe move into the first chair and have somebody else ride in the second chair. And oftentimes we will do that with crummy leads because they're going to burn them.
Right.
You just know. And it's the driving range. It's get out there and groove your swing. Just swing, swing, swing before we put you on the course. We know they're not going anywhere. Don't feel badly if they decide not to do it. They're not going to decide to do it, but just get comfortable. You're going to run the presentation. Get comfortable with how you'd like to approach the tour of the home. Get comfortable with how you segue from that to maybe we could find a place to sit down and talk a little more detail about, time frame and budgeting. Just practice those things. Again, being realistic without the concern that, oh my gosh, I've run 3 leads and none of them have decided to do anything. Nope. You're going to run 20 more and none of them are going to decide to do things. And, once you get past 20, then we might start to give you some that might turn into something. So, we're going to gradually ease them in as opposed to throw them into the deep end of the pool, just because we've done this enough to know that it's just unrealistic and it takes time.
No, that's seems like a logical and healthy way to do it. And so now they're up to speed. You've got your team hitting on all cylinders. Do you foster sort of a healthy competition vibe with the group, and how do people know where they stand?
Yeah, so we have an annual meeting every year, and we sort of post a leaderboard and assign a top gun, and they're the big award winner, and everybody claps, and so they get recognized that way in front of the entire organization. But then we also meet weekly and put numbers up so that people understand where they are and how they're positioned within the group. It's the other thing we've learned over the years, and we do with the annual meeting, is it's not all about top line sales, that we introduce other metrics to who wins. And that might be what the gross profit is on their project, estimated versus actual. So the people whose jobs come in at or above where they're supposed to are doing a little better job than people that are selling a lot and having them come in lower than expected. And then we also weave in some of the client reviews, ratings into that as well, because if they're out there creating delighted clients, chances are they're going to come back, or they're going to recommend us to somebody else and refer us to their colleague or whatever. So we weave some of that in. And then again, we're pretty fortunate. We've got a mature group. They've worked together for a long time, many of them, and they like to be in the top, 10%.
Yes.
And so you see people jockeying and not wanting to turn something in until the last second so they can jump up in front of somebody else.
Yes.
There's a whole strategy
back and then
involved in
throw it into the mix. Yes,
right,
100%.
exactly. So we definitely do that and keep track of that, and everybody knows that. And, so there is and it's not crummy. It's not, cutthroat or anything like that. But there is I want to be on the All-Star team. I want to be the best. I want to be recognized for that. And, and we try and nurture that a little bit, because some people that matters. There are some really competitive people in that role, and they want to win. And that's how they gauge winning is, am I at the top of that list?
Well, it seems really smart to reward them for the metrics that matter to the business, not just that top line revenue. And have you noticed, when you started introducing that it did affect behavior and affected how they think about things?
Absolutely, because they know the impact of it. And with anything else, awareness helps to foster that change of behavior, right? That if we weren't doing a good enough job previously, making sure people knew where they fell in some of these metrics, then you didn't have to compete and it was hidden. And so if there's daylight on all of that stuff, all of a sudden you don't want to be at the bottom of that list. You may not be uber competitive and want to be at the top, but you don't want to be at the bottom. Nobody wants to be at the bottom. So, so yeah, it has helped with that.
And given, I guess, that competitiveness, how do you encourage knowledge sharing across the team and keep them motivated to want to share with others and not keep that secret sauce in for themselves?
Well, yeah. And again, culturally, maybe we're just fortunate, as many other firms are, in that, it's a group that likes to learn and wants to get better at what they do. And there is no super secret sales technique that if you do this, the client signs that piece of paper every single time. That just doesn't exist. Or at least I'm not aware of it. So most of the stuff that gets shared is more product knowledge, more permit knowledge, more code knowledge, more building that, again, confidence that we work in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. has the most complicated zoning regulations of anywhere on the planet, I'm convinced, and they seem to change weekly. And so people share that, hey, if you run a lead in this area, chances are it's zoned this way and you need to be aware of this. Or if you see a big tree in the backyard that's now been declared a heritage tree and you have to do this, that, and the other thing. And all that stuff sounds silly until you're with a client and you say, well, that's something we need to be worried about. Why is that? Well, that tree has a circumference of this or greater. And so there are some things nobody else told me that. All of a sudden, it's just another little nudge to help us look a little smarter than the average bear,
Makes a lot of sense. So a lot of what we've been talking about, I think, are the processes that you put in place, the documentation, et cetera, to kind of help set folks up to be successful. I thought it was interesting that, you said, times have been good, right? Clients have been lining up. And so some of the muscles atrophy, even on the process front. So how have you dealt with that to kind of get folks back into that frame of mind of following those sort of processes that set them up for success, even though it may be a little rusty?
Yeah. So, having a very veteran team is a blessing and a curse, right? That most of the times it's a good thing, but getting people to change can be a struggle. And the other thing that comes with that is sometimes I think you grow numb to things that might matter to others if you've experienced them 75,000 times. And an example of that we've been trying to spend some more time on lately is, I mentioned design studios earlier, and that, we're in a city urban environment in some of the office locations, at least, and people are busy and live, hectic lives and are balancing 75 different tasks at any one time. And so if we can make sure they understand that we have a place that they can come and they can pick cabinetry and countertops and tile and faucets and windows and siding all in one place, all guided by a professional designer in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, that is a differentiator. And we've grown numb to it because we've had it for a while, and everybody knows that. Nobody knows that. And so we've got to develop some materials to make sure we convey that information to others. Something as silly as, I think of it as human direct mail almost, in that we have all this stuff on websites and here, there, and everywhere, but you're dependent on driving somebody to that and that person actually paying attention to it. Well, when you're in the home with them, and if you just happen to have a folder full of stuff, chances are you got a better chance of getting them to pay attention to it. So we can introduce, here's photos of our, studio spaces. Oh, let me show you the recognition that we've, accomplished over the course of the last 5 years, instead of pointing them to the website. Here is some budgeting information on a piece of paper before we showed up. So it's not like we were influenced by who you are, or the car you drive, or the shoes you wear, or whatever. This was baked before we got here. All of that kind of stuff, we're trying to just reinvigorate the team to share and not assume that clients know that. And then there's just the level of follow-up that we got away from, because you couldn't follow up. It was like, you got one shot. I'm here. You want to do it or not? Because I got 17 other people I got to talk to, and now you don't. So you've got to go back, and you've got to pay more attention to past clients too, because they've trusted you before. And chances are, if they have something else to do, you'd be the person they'd want involved, hopefully. So it's just doing those sorts of things, and then making sure everybody knows what you do, so that if they hear something, they're going to push it your way. So there's a lot of that. And honestly, it's just repetition. Hey guys, remember. Hey guys, remember. On the one-on-ones, what are we doing here? How many past clients have you talked to?
Right.
Just that kind of stuff. Over and over and over again that we got away from, and it's time to get back to that.
It's interesting. One of the things that we're hearing, and I think you mentioned at the beginning, that having processes in place that you actually share with your client up front is a selling point. And we are kind of hearing from a technology standpoint that that's the case, right? Having the client dashboard, having things that enable you to show the client up front, here's what's going to make it a good experience for you, because you're not just competing with them going to another firm, you're competing with all the other things they could do with their time and money right now that aren't necessarily remodeling. Because as we know, remodeling it's exhausting, even if you're not swinging the hammer.
Right, even if everything goes right.
We've been through this. I've been through 3. Like it's a lot, right? It's a lot of investment, and so you have to feel, as the homeowner has to feel good about going into that project and feeling good about it. Curious if that's something that your salespeople also use as a selling point of
absolutely
accessibility.
Because like you said, you're not just competing with other firms. You're competing with a trip to Europe or a new car or a whatever, that people can spend money on different things rather than just their home. So we are trying to focus kind of on the excitement component of it a little bit too, because you shouldn't dread this. This should be exciting. This should be fun. And let us show you how we can make this fun. And that part of that is process related. We're not going to ask you to do this until you know this. So we won't put you in a position that you're making a decision you're uncomfortable with, because you will have made other decisions that make this decision easier. So there's a logical progression to all of this. So I think clients do find real comfort in knowing you guys really seem to have this figured out. Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. We've done this how many times?
Right.
And we took the minute to write it down and get everybody to follow it. So there is real, again, back to that, especially for a smaller firm, it's really hard to do. And I would just encourage people to start that process, because that's the hard part, is starting it. Once you get it going, chances are you'll continue. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Get in motion, write something down, start to move in that area, and then workshop it. Share it with your team, massage it, tweak it, adjust it, and then get it out in front of clients and explain how you do things. And I think you'll see positive results.
I think that's great advice for everyone. In terms of the team themselves, you said folks struggle with change, and we hear that too. So sometimes we'll kind of the back office team will adopt the technology, but it's hard to get folks in the field to adopt technology, or there's one outlier, and so everyone's kind of waiting around for the one outlier to turn over and change over. Do you kind of dictate the use? How do you encourage folks to embrace and get out of their comfort zone, for their own sake and for your company's
sake? Well, I don't
sake?
think we've ever figured out how to get people to embrace it, maybe tolerate it or something. I don't know. We have been most successful with new policy, procedures, technologies, whatever, if it benefits the person that's doing it. And so an example of that would be DocuSign or Sign Now or whatever, that it's like, oh, why would I bother to do that? They can just write me a check while I'm there. Like, it's 2024. Does anybody even know where their checkbook is? What are you talking about? That there are easier ways to do these things, or you can get something. If we have an addendum for a project and clients agreed to it and all the rest, then it's so much easier to just send it off to them, get a digital signature on it, and you get it back, and then everybody's on the same page. So it's stuff like that. Some of the CRM has been a little more challenging to get people to keep that data up to date because they see it more as benefiting others perhaps than themselves. But, as a team, you kind of have to do those things because others are dependent on it. Or, another example is we use Buildertrend for a lot of the production stuff, and getting photos of ongoing projects in there can sometimes be difficult to get a project manager to stop for a second and take some pictures of a plumber working or whatever, because they're figuring, who cares? It's a plumber working. But I was just in a meeting before this trying to convey to them that, like, hey guys, this really helps me. And it helps me because as I'm sitting and going through every single project that a designer or developer has on their plate, I can pull that up and say, it looks like the plumbers are working. So trades are in, drywall's coming soon. Are cabinets on their way? Because if cabinets are on their way, that benefits you, Mr. Project Manager, because you're not waiting for that. So if I can spin it so that you putting that in there helps you somehow, and you may not realize it, we're more likely to see success with those sorts of things. But, remodelers in general are not at the cutting edge of most technologies. And, this is technology to most remodeling firms. And
yes,
so
the phone, everything's got to be right on your mobile phone at your fingertips. No, we're 100% focused on mobile and making it user friendly, because if it's not easy, it's true. People aren't
they'll shy away from it. Yeah, but I think coming out of COVID and people just getting more comfortable with remote meetings and having to do things not face to face has helped a little bit with the fear of new technologies. Like, okay, I get it. This does have some benefits. Maybe it's not what I'm most comfortable with, but it does help in some ways. So I think there's a little more openness to it, but just as a group, most people are not jumping in with both feet. And it is a little bit of a struggle to build it into the process and get people to do it.
Got it. So I guess maybe just to wrap it up, what's something you're feeling hopeful or good about right now in terms of
I'm feeling really good about a lot of things. I mean, it's like interest rates are still high. There's no homes on the market. There's no inventory.
Yep.
Why would anybody give up a 3% mortgage? They're going to stay where they're at. The home is more important than ever. I think people have realized that over the course of the last 5 years, that it is a place that you can kind of hide from everything, and it's worth investing in. And I think it's a real, I'm super optimistic in that I think the better firms are going to be successful, that it's easier to leverage technology, to leverage process, to leverage resources, because it's really, for a smaller firm, it's hard to invest in those technologies, to learn those technologies, to let go of some responsibilities so you can focus on creating more opportunities. You just kind of fall into the trap of doing the same thing. And, and
it's getting easier. There are options now, and I think
there are absolutely.
It's all available. I feel like there used to be, there wasn't anything available, and so there was such a huge difference. But I think there's a lot that are helping folks and willing to embrace change, compete, right, and really be an impressive right business, not just right hammer swinger, right?
I totally agree.
It's there for the taking.
It is. But I'm not sure enough younger people that would embrace those technologies are coming into the business, and a lot of it's older guys like me that are continuing to do it and maybe not as willing to embrace this, which is a real, like you said, opportunity for someone to enter and differentiate.
Kind of like Bruce, like we see that next generation that is taking, with the family business, they are still coming in, and they absolutely are the ones that are implementing these changes because they've grown up as digital, close to digital natives, and they're like, Dad, this is crazy. Yeah, we've had some really very entertaining interviews with people talking about moving their parents into the 21st century. But it's all good.
Have a VCR underneath their TV that's flashing 12 o'clock or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, funny.
Awesome.
Funny.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. This was incredibly fun, and I think going to be extremely valuable for a lot of folks looking to build out that sales muscle.
Thank you.
Awesome.
This series is brought to you by House Pro. To learn more about our best-in-class software for winning clients, managing projects, and simplifying your workflow, visit house.com/pro.